Alrighty, everyone. This is meteorologist Timmy Albertson here with you guys for another little tropical update, and I guess we'll make this also count as tonight's weather chat. We do have some updates with Hurricane Lee. Hurricane Lee continues to intensify pretty nicely. Unfortunately, Hurricane Jova continues to unintensify rather quickly here. So we're going to take a little bit of a look here at Hurricane Lee. Obviously, there's probably a lot of questions. Some people are wondering, is it going to make landfall in the U.S.? And unfortunately, the spoiler alert for that is going to be it's still too early to tell. But with that in mind, before we go any further, just for those of you who are not familiar with it, the Saffir-Simpson scale, that's what we use in the Atlantic and East and Central Pacific when it comes to rating hurricanes and any tropical system. The lowest is a tropical depression. That's what Lee started off as, is a little tropical depression, number 13. And then when the winds, so all of this is rated based on the wind speeds, and we'll go more into that in just a little bit. But when the winds of the system get up to about 39 miles an hour, well, then it becomes a tropical storm, and that's when it receives its name. So we don't name tropical depressions, but we name tropical storms, and then they hold on to that name for the rest of their life. Even if that tropical storm weakens back down to a tropical depression, it'll still retain the name. If it intensifies, well, then it becomes a hurricane once it reaches winds of 74 miles an hour. So basically, we divide hurricanes because in meteorology, we like to categorize everything. And I mean, everything has a category to it. You will quickly learn as you go that there is a ranking system for everything in weather. Hurricanes are divided into 5 categories based solely on their wind speeds. The lowest is a category 1, and that is a 74 to 95 mile an hour wind range, which you see as the number in each of those columns at the bottom left, MPH there, miles per hour. From there, it goes to category 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now, category 5 is the strongest. It has no upper bound to its wind, so much like an EF5 tornado, it just has to have the minimum wind, and it can be however strong it wants to be after that. Well, hurricanes are kind of the same way. Once they reach winds of 157 miles an hour or greater, then they become a category 5 hurricane. So with that in mind, Lee is expected to become a Category 5 hurricane in its lifetime. The question is, how strong of a Category 5 hurricane will it be? Well, let's go ahead and kind of take a little bit of a look here at Lee right now. And Lee has just continued to intensify, looking a lot better than it did this time last night. 130 mile an hour winds sustained right now. So that does put it as a Category 4 hurricane. A couple of years ago, they revised the Saffir-Simpson scale a little bit. When I was younger, that would have been a Category 3 hurricane still, but now it's a Category 4. But anyways, the more you know. And actually, Category 5s used to be 155 mile an hour winds. And then, of course, back in 2012, they changed that to 157 mile an hour winds. Anyways, that's besides the point. Category 4 hurricane right now. Low end of the Category 4 hurricane. Again, if we take a look at our scale, 130 mile an hour winds puts it right there. If I can point it right, you get the idea. Puts it right there at the Category 4, barely. So with that in mind, Lee, yes, is expected to continue to intensify, very well likely becoming a Category 5 hurricane. If not later tonight, then probably maybe sometime during the day tomorrow. Now, when we go back to Lee here, the kind of the uncertainty with Lee is that Lee is really entering into kind of a favorable environment. It really is. There's not a lot of wind shear. The ocean temperatures are very, very warm. And it's just there's a lot of moisture there too. Naturally, you're over an ocean, so I would hope there's moisture, but tropical systems like extra moisture, and so there is a possibility here that Lee could kind of continue to maybe undergo some rapid intensification, and that's a little bit difficult to forecast, as well as another factor with hurricanes, especially ones that last for a long time, and that is known as the eye wall replacement cycle, which happens with long-lived hurricanes, sometimes multiple times. I've seen some hurricanes go through them, 3 times or sometimes even more. And while that's important, is that during the eye wall replacement cycle, the hurricane can kind of temporarily weaken a little bit as it replaces its eye with a new one. Basically, that is expected to maybe happen a little bit with Franklin, but probably not within the 24-hour period. And again, the eyeball replacement is not a permanent thing. It just sometimes takes 12 to 24 hours sometimes to undergo it. And it's also kind of difficult to predict. So there's a lot of uncertainties right now with Lee. But what is kind of certain right now, at least the way the Hurricane Center has it kind of labeled out here, is that the models are in really good agreement with this system. They have been, and there's a little bit of an upper level ridge, or well, kind of a subtropical ridge, I guess I should say, that is up to its north. So that's keeping Lee from turning to the north. So Lee is kind of on this northwesterly direction, I guess I should say. Sometimes they want to turn straight to the north, but that ridge is doing a good job in keeping it down. It's also kind of pushing Lee along here at about 15 miles an hour. So why that's important is basically that's kind of what's keeping it from taking a straight north turn. Low pressures, which a hurricane is very low pressures, and the lowest pressures we normally see here in the on the planet. And a ridge is an area of higher pressure. Low pressures cannot move a high pressure. The high pressure is the dominant one, so Lee's got no choice but to go around it. Now, eventually, as we go towards the end of the weekend, that ridge might start to break down a little bit, and that might start to maybe give Lee a little bit of a northerly turn here. But that's still looking pretty far out. So there's still a lot of uncertainties with Franklin, but not Franklin, with Lee. But what we do see with Lee is the speed's probably going to stay steady for at least another day or so. But once that ridge begins to kind of break down a little bit, Lee's speed might begin to slow down just a little bit because it won't have that push kind of helping it along a little bit there. So a little scientific jargon there for you. But again, long story short, you look at that map and if you draw a straight line, that puts it in Florida or Georgia. However, keep in mind, folks, that that's Tuesday. Okay, the farthest point out of this forecast. All right, 120 hours. That's Tuesday afternoon. Okay. A lot can happen after that. There's some indications that another trough is going to swing its way through the eastern U.S., and that could pick up Lee and jog it up towards the north. But again, when and where that would happen is uncertain, or even if it shows up at all. So again, you got to think that, in meteorology, especially once you get beyond 5 days, certainty in forecast really begins to drop off, noticeably. In fact, actually it drops off after about 3 days. But really, once you get past 5 days, even with today's models, there's still a lot of uncertainty. So with that in mind, you don't want to draw a straight line from the center right now, following that cone and then into the U.S. because a lot could change from there. At this time, we just don't know exactly what Lee is going to do by the time we get towards the middle or end of the work week. And again, part of that just has to go with the overall forecasting uncertainty with everything. Again, remember, in weather, everything is connected. So, if you're expecting a trough to swing its way through, the eastern part of the U.S., well, its timing is going to play a very important role in what Lee decides it wants to do. Now, again, these tropical systems kind of act a little bit independently in a weird way. And by that, I mean, it's not like a cold front where, it's just kind of one solid line here. This is just kind of a singular storm that depends on the atmosphere that's around it. But, it's a little bit different than forecasting for a cold front or something along those lines, if that makes any sense. So, little bit of a different thing. Not exactly probably the most scientific way to explain that, but that's the situation again with most tropical systems is they do kind of to a little bit of a degree act a bit independently from more than most other systems would, without going into a lot of detail. So that's Lee. Pretty cool, huh? I think it's cool. Like I said, it's expected to maybe have winds of up to 100, and I think what is the Hurricane Center thinking here with Lee? I believe they had it. Let me double check the numbers here. Go ahead and we'll take kind of a little bit of a look here at what they're expecting point wise. And you don't see this on the graphic there. When we do pull up the radar, we have it there, but it'd just be easier because all we're just kind of discussing is one particular point here. And I believe what they have it at right now is 165 mile an hour winds, probably by this time tomorrow evening. So when we do our weather chat tomorrow evening, we could very well be talking about a Category 5 hurricane. with winds maybe of around 165 miles an hour. But if Lee gets its way and wants to rapidly intensify, which it could very well do, especially given its environment and that it's been on a pretty good intensity, trend here over the past 48 hours or so. It's moving along pretty well. So maybe a little bit stronger. We'll just kind of have to wait and see. With that in mind, let's go ahead. I just want to double check to see one thing here. If there are any buoys out around Lee. Now, unfortunately, the only buoy that's even remotely close is, I think, out of service at the moment. But if we do flip over to the radar here, we'll take a look at Lee's track. Whoop, that's not the right screen. Sorry, I got so many different slide parts here to keep an eye on. So this is, again, Lee's track here, kind of in the more colored spot. Again, it's expected to be a Category 5 during this part right here. So that would be as we go into later tonight and then into tomorrow. Winds, again, around 165 miles an hour by the time we get towards tomorrow afternoon. And then kind of staying that. Now, again, the uncertainty here is, there's a lot of things kind of a slightly uncertain, maybe some eye wall replacements, and maybe a little bit of other factors there that could maybe allow it to weaken just a little bit. But again, the uncertainty is still high. We're still dealing with a high-end Category 4 hurricane, so at least that's what's expected of winds of maybe, let's see here, the final point in the forecast is 140 mile an hour wind, so that's middle part of the Category 4. But honestly, up until then, it's a high-end Category 4, Category 5 hurricane too. So there you go. Again, its wind field is expanding a little bit. So anyways, that's just kind of what we're looking at. Again, when you zoom out the track, you can see that it is still way out in the open waters. It does look like we will have a close passing by of one buoy. It's this guy over here, and it looks like it might be dark over there, so there's no photos because it's dark. It's in the ocean. We're not going to see anything. So at daytime, this will look pretty cool, though. Actually, when are they expecting this to? Let me double check when this is going to pass by. This is buoy 41004. It'll actually probably pass by it during the daytime, and that's going to be when? Today's the 7th, tomorrow's the 8th, the 9th, so Saturday. Hey, we may have a pretty good show tomorrow, Saturday afternoon here, watching this thing pass by that buoy. That could be kind of fun to watch. I know what we're going to be doing this weekend is taking a look at that. But there's a few other buoys around there, too. That's what these little green dots are. All right, folks, we've talked a lot about Lee. Lee is certainly going to be the big news maker, as every hurricane is every single year. The media grabs a hold of it, and you know how it goes. But anyways, yeah, let's go ahead and we're going to flip over and take a little bit of a look at Jova here. Jova. I can't pronounce it. It's not a Slavic name, so I can't pronounce it. Let's take a look here. It's not looking quite as good as this time yesterday. Yesterday when we were looking at it, it was looking really well. The problem is that Jova decided it wanted to suck in a little bit of mid-level drier air, and that's kind of what's giving it this wobbly looking shape now here. And it's also eventually going to run into some much cooler waters, which if you're a hurricane is not good. So the peak of Jova here was, and again, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing the name wrong. Like I said, it's not a Slavic name, so I don't know exactly how to pronounce it. But what I can tell you though about it is that it's not going to get any stronger. 145 mile an hour winds right now this morning, and it was I think about 160 or 165. That was the peak. This thing is just going to keep on weakening now at this point. You can see it's starting to lose that cooler cloud top color. It's not looking too, it's still looking good right now, but it ain't going to be looking good for much longer. So that's Jova. We also have one other tropical system that I did not get a time to put any graphics up for, but it's another wave that came off of the African coast, and its name is Margot. Never heard of that name before. Margot. And actually, when I first saw it, I thought it was Margaret, and then I noticed it was Margot. So pretty interesting there. Hey, let's take a look at Margot here. Again, we don't have any satellite up for it. Margot's going to be staying out in the open waters unless you're a boat or a fish. It's not really going to be affecting you, at least directly. Right now, it's a tropical storm. Looks like its intensification probably will not be as rapid as Lee's has been, but at least maybe becoming a hurricane, a Category 1 hurricane by the time we get towards. This looks to be Sunday morning, perhaps. So we'll keep an eye on it there. But it doesn't look like it's going to be doing, too much, close to land. It'd be interesting to see what it does do, as it always is interesting to see, but it's just gonna be kind of hanging out. So Margot, unfortunately, will be taking a back seat to Lee. And For those of you who are big fans of Jova, unfortunately, Jova is going to be weakening here. Hey, while we're on it, really quickly, I have some storms down across Louisiana, mainly just producing a little bit in the way of some hail and some gusty winds. If you've been down there, it's always hot and humid, so it doesn't surprise me one bit that we have these storms down here at this time. Again, a few of these are severe, but like I said, they're kind of borderline severe with, about 1 inch size hail and maybe some 60-mile-per-hour wind gusts. Certainly, gusty winds will probably be the main thing with some of these storms, but we're not expecting, the high, strong winds. I mean, these mainly going to be borderline severe. So 60-mile-an-hour winds or so, with a lot of these storms, and maybe a little bit in the way of some hail. Again, kind of lighten up a good portion of the southeastern, I guess the Gulf Coast radar, at least around Louisiana and Mississippi, parts of Alabama. That cold front that we were talking about yesterday that was producing some storms out across Arkansas and Tennessee is continuing to push its way further to the east. It's actually also kind of responsible for producing some stronger storms over around New York State, up around the Albany area. Again, mainly just for some gusty winds, about 60 miles an hour, and a little bit in the way of some small hail. You can see they got a severe thunderstorm watch that is in effect. This front is also going to try to, it's not going to push, it's not going to clear through New England and the East Coast tonight. As a matter of fact, it's probably going to slow down a little bit, so they might have another shot for some strong thunderstorms tomorrow. Maybe we're taking a little bit of a look at, but again, not expecting that to be a severe weather outbreak. As we've seen over the past couple of days, mainly just some storms that are borderline severe, with a little bit around 1 inch to at times 1.5 inch size hail and some 60-mile-an-hour winds here and there. So that's what's going on across the country right now, or at least a good part of North America. There does appear to be a couple of strong storms up around Ottawa, Ontario. Let's take a look there. That's actually a pretty decent looking storm. On the Ottawa radar there, here's Ottawa. It's right at the edge of the capital of Canada. This is Ontario. Right on the other side is Quebec. Quebec is part of Canada. I mean, the province of Ontario right here, and Ottawa is actually in the province of Ontario, but then as soon as you go across, and it turns into Quebec, and then Montreal's over there. But yeah, it's a pretty decent looking thunderstorm here. My guess is they probably got it warned for mainly going to be winds. It's kind of got a nice little bend there. I just want to see that on their velocity radar imagery. Yeah, there may actually be a little bit of rotation with that. Sometimes with these lines, these kind of bowing segments, we start seeing these little kinks, which in this case might be a bit hard to see because I'm in the way. But right about there, got a little bit of a kind of a kink there. And if we go ahead and loop this here, I just want to see how the storm has been generally moving. Yeah, so it looks like it's got a little bit of a bow segment, which means there's some, extra little push there of some wind. We can kind of see that bright green on the velocity radar imagery right there. Certainly some decent winds, and like I said, that may actually. I did look good there for a few scans. There may have been a little bit of low-level rotation with that storm there, and again, that's not unheard of or not unusual. It's not normal, but it's not unusual. Sometimes these lines, you get a little bit of bowing happening, and provide just enough wind shear that you can get some little low-level rotation. And looking at that right there around Ampere, that is a town I've never heard of. I've heard of a lot of towns, but that is one I've never heard of. It does look like there might have been there is probably a little bit of rotation there Again, this is the velocity radar imagery. Greens are winds going towards the radar, reds are winds going away from the radar. In this case, the radar is in Ottawa. When we start seeing these colors kind of butting up against each other and in kind of higher values, it sometimes is a good indication of a little bit of rotation. And so we use this to look for strong winds, and we use it to look for tornadoes in the radar. And it did look like a couple of scans ago that it might have had at least a little bit in the way of some low-level rotation. So I would say that's probably the strongest storm going on right now, aside from the hurricane, obviously, but at least on land. This guy up here around Ottawa is probably the strongest storm we have on the radar right now, and looks like it's probably got some good little gusty wind to it here. Let's see here what value that would be, about maybe a little 50-mile-an-hour wind gust, but I guess it's more the rotation aspect of it. So if we wanted to consider it strong in that regard, but I think if we wanted to go with overall strongest storm, it's either this guy in Ontario or it was that one storm we were looking at down in Louisiana near Thibodaux. Let's see here really quickly, and then we'll go ahead and wrap this video up. Let's just see here. Yeah, it was right down here around Thibodaux, the Houma area in Louisiana. Take a look here. Yeah, that looks like it's got at least a little bit in the way of some hail and some gusty winds, but again, just kind of your summer afternoon down there. Alrighty, everyone. Well, thank you all very much for taking the time to join me here. I know it was kind of quick. We'll keep an eye on Hurricane Lee here. Like I said, we'll do our next weather chat tomorrow evening, and who knows, by tomorrow evening, again, we could be looking at a Category 5 hurricane out in the water, so that'd be pretty cool to take a look at. And maybe we'll see if any of those storms out across the East Coast end up eventually being strong. In the meantime, I hope you all have a good rest of your Thursday evening. Tomorrow's Friday. So until that time, I hope you all have a good rest of your evening. Enjoy the hurricanes. Enjoy the storms if you got access to a radar. Otherwise, look forward to seeing you guys back here next evening or tomorrow evening. Have a good one, everyone.